Hello friends, welcome to the final lecture of our course. So in the previous lectures we've been considering the basics of thermodynamics, the different laws, and we have attempted to either adopt or employ those laws to understand the different phases or phase changes in the material, or rather the different state of a material. So we began by considering or adopting those thermodynamics laws to the solutions, and now we are narrowing it down to the solid solution. And in this lecture, the last lecture, we will try to gain as much as understanding as possible on how to describe, or how to rather predict, so to speak, the stable phases in a given solid solution. So with that, we will be winding this course. So what essentially you would have gained from this course is how one can apply the laws of thermodynamics to a specific material system. So even though we have been considering, or we began considering the thermodynamics of solution, we saw the reason why we have to consider the thermodynamics of solution, because alloy is nothing but, or alloy can be viewed as a solid solution. So therefore, whatever understanding we gained on thermodynamics of solution can be directly adopted to understand the thermodynamics of alloy, solid solutions. Now, in addition to that, in this lecture, the concluding one, we will be attempting to gain our understanding on what stable phase is, or how a stable phase can be described using the thermodynamics, or how a stable phase can be identified using the thermodynamics of solution, particularly the solid solution. So without any ado, let us continue where we left off in the previous lecture. So in the previous lecture, we have been considering a thermodynamic function that helps us describe the thermodynamic state of a material system that comprises of more than one components. So this is the Gibbs free energy, and the Gibbs free energy, rather the variable that are associated with the Gibbs free energy, it includes temperature, pressure, and the number of moles of different components that are present. So when we assumed a system that comprises of k different material, k different elements, one solvent and different alloying elements or different solutes, depending on the concentration of the solutes and the solvent, along with the temperature and pressure, the corresponding Gibbs free energy of the system varies. Now, we were able to, in the previous lecture, we began by considering what would be the change in the Gibbs free energy when these variables changed. So we were able to arrive at this, or we were able to consider these expressions. And so depending on which variable changed, we were able to rather extend this expression. And when you consider the partial derivative of the Gibbs free energy with respect to one variable, it is assumed that the other variables are constants for pressure, and all the other concentrations are assumed to be constant. So where n includes all the concentrations. And we can do the same for the other variable, which is the pressure, temperature, and all the other variables are constant when you consider the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to pressure. And finally, what we have is, we have the change in the Gibbs free energy when the components, the amount of components change, assuming the temperature and pressure are constant. So now, and even in the previous lecture, we have restricted ourselves to a condition wherein the temperature and pressure are constant. Whatever change is occurring, this change occurs at a constant temperature and at a constant pressure. So correspondingly, the change that occurs during the constant pressure and the temperature can be expressed by the summation of the individual change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to the change in the amount of the specific component. So this is what describes the overall change in the Gibbs free energy when the temperature and pressure is constant. Now this partial derivative of the Gibbs free energy with respect to the number of moles of the specific components is referred to as the chemical potential. So therefore, this expression can be written in this manner. Now in the previous lecture, we saw that these two variables, that is the change in the Gibbs free energy, and for these two parameters, one on the left and the other on the right, that is the change in the Gibbs free energy and the chemical potential, they indicate or they mean the same thing. The only difference is one is an extensive property. The Gibbs free energy is an extensive property, whereas the chemical potential is an intensive property. So we can arrive at the intensive Gibbs chemical potential from the Gibbs free energy by removing the influence of the amount of components. And from that understanding, so we have Gibbs free energy on the one hand, which is an extensive property, depends on amount of material that is present in the system. And we have chemical potential, which is independent of it, therefore it is an intensive property. We can arrive at one starting from the other by just removing the influence of the chemical or the number of components that is present in the system. So therefore G can be, that is chemical Gibbs free energy of system, can be expressed as the summation of the product of the chemical potential of the components and the number of components, the number of moles of components that is present in the system. So this is something that we saw in our previous lecture. Now when we consider a solution that comprises of two elements, that is A and B, so we are considering a solution of components or elements A and B, the Gibbs free energy of such a solution can be expressed as mu A XA plus mu B XB. So we have bar here because we are replacing the number of moles with mole fraction. So here it is related to the number of moles of the component, here it is related to the mole fraction of the component. So we have to distinguish it, we have included a bar here. Now when the change in the Gibbs free energy is of this form, that is for the solution mu A and B is of this form, we have an expression that is similar to that of the one that we observed when we considered the saturated vapor pressure. So what we ideally have is, we have a linear relation, a linear change in the Gibbs free energy as the mole fraction changes. So when you consider illustration such as this, wherein at the one end you have a completely it represents a complete A element, and on the other hand you have it is represented by element B, and at each of these extremes you have a corresponding Gibbs free energy or Gibbs free energy per mole, and that is represented by mu naught A, and here it is represented by mu naught B. So we have identified 2 points at the extremes of this illustration or the extremes of this plot, and this expression, it indicates a linear relation. So therefore the Gibbs free energy for this mixture is represented by a linear line this way. Now we saw that this does not indicate a solution, meaning when you have a complete interaction between the two components A and B, it deviates from this linearity. So that is what we took away, or that is what we understand from the Henry and Raoult's relation. So that is what we understand from the Raoult's and Henry's relation, that when you have a complete mixing of the component A and B, so when the component A and B, they no longer behave as their elemental form within their solution, then there is a disparity, there is a deviation from this linearity, and only when there is a deviation from the linearity, it indicates that this dissolution, the complete dissolution, has occurred. So if there is a strict linearity, then what we essentially have is a mechanical mixture. So that is what these two laws indicates. That's what our thermodynamics, our understanding of the thermodynamics of solution indicates. So what this straight line here we have is nothing but the representation of how the Gibbs free energy changes when we have the mechanical mixing. When we have a mechanical mixing of A and B, the straight line is how the Gibbs free energy of that mixture changes. Now what we are interested in is not the mechanical mixture, but what we are interested is in the solution. So let us, instead of considering A and B, if you consider this example as, for instance, iron and chromium, what we essentially have is, when we have the Gibbs free energy of the alloy of iron and chromium that is represented by a straight line, what we essentially have is, we have a mechanical mixture. We are not established a complete intermingling of iron and chromium. So if you consider it, illustration would be something like this. We would have both iron and chromium in the same system, but they would not have mingled with one another. If you zoom in and look, you will find iron at one extreme and the chromium at the other extreme. So they are not intermingled. So in this case, the Gibbs free energy adapts a linear form. When we need a complete dissolution of iron and chromium, meaning when you look even in the atomistic scale, we want the chromium, which is now a solute, to occupy one of the positions that was earlier occupied by the iron atom. So this is what the solid solution means. So it has completely dissolved and it is now occupying a position that was earlier occupied by, or that is meant for. So this is the chromium and this is the iron. So now the complete dissolution means the chromium is now occupying a position that is meant for iron. Now in this case, the Gibbs free energy should be different, at least it should deviate from the linearity. So that is what we are attempting to understand. What would be the nature of such a curve wherein there is a complete dissolution of two metals, iron and chromium. They are dissolving, or we are attempting to mix it when they are just a mechanical mixture. When they are not completely dissolved with one another, what we end up having is a mechanical mixture, and the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture is linear. When we have a complete dissolution, what we end up having is we end up disturbing the linearity and introducing some non-linearity. So let us see what describes or what dictates this non-linearity. Now we can consider the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture in this way. We can represent it in this way, and the Gibbs free energy of the solution in this manner. Now supposing, even though we initially mix it, it forms a mechanical mixture, it is possible for the mechanical mixture to transform into a solution spontaneously on its own. So irreversibly, a mechanical mixture can transform into a solution. So this can happen according to the second law of thermodynamics when the delta G, that is the difference in the Gibbs free energy of the solution to that of the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture, is less than 0. So when this condition is satisfied, what we end up having is the mechanical mixture. Even though you have molten iron and you are putting in some bars of metal bars of chromium in it, even though initially it is a mechanical mixture, the dissolution is possible when this thermodynamically, when this condition is satisfied. So meaning a solution of iron chromium can be achieved when the Gibbs free energy of the solution is less than the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture. So this is what we understand from the second law of thermodynamics. Now based on this, we can predict, or we can have an expression that dictates the formation of the solution based on the change in the Gibbs free energy, because ultimately it's the change in the Gibbs free energy that dictates whether a solution will form from a mechanical mixture or not. So this term here can be treated separately, and it can be expressed as in its canonical form in this manner. Now this expression includes the change in the enthalpy and the change in the entropy for a specific temperature. This is what the expression for the change in the Gibbs free energy describes. Now let us consider this expression separately, and let us assume a case 1 where the change in the enthalpy. So what we are considering is the change in the Gibbs free energy. So this change in the Gibbs free energy is when a mechanical mixture changes to solution. So now let us consider a case where when the mechanical mixture changes to solution, so let us assume a ladle wherein you have molten iron and you are putting a solid block of chromium, and you have sufficiently high temperature. Now this solid block of chromium, initially it produces a mechanical mixture because molten iron is separate and the solid block of chromium is separate. But as the temperature increases, as we allow the chromium to dissolve, the chromium completely is absorbed by the molten iron, and ultimately it establishes an alloy of chromium and iron. So chromium of iron-chromium, or rather an alloy of iron and chromium. Now during this dissolution, let us assume that there is not much change in the enthalpy of the system. So the change in the enthalpy of the system is close to 0. Then ultimately the change in the Gibbs free energy that dictates this dissolution, this change from the mechanical mixture to the solution, is rather exclusively governed by the change in the entropy. Now while considering entropy, we saw that there are different ways of viewing at it. One way is degree of irreversible change, and the other is the degree of randomness. So when you consider the degree of randomness, it depends on how or the different number of ways a given system can be arranged. So it can be quantified rather in an, or it can be expressed or quantified in a using some statistical techniques. So you can use some statistical expressions to quantify the entropy that dictates the or that describes the degree of randomness. But for our understanding, let us go back to our initial example wherein we had two atoms, that is atoms of two components, or let's just say in this case C and D. So we had two gas molecules separated by a wall, and when we remove the wall, these gas molecules begin to interact with each other, they mingle with each other, they mix with each other, thereby increasing the entropy. So the amount of this gas molecules penetrate into this region and this gas molecule penetrates into this region, it indicates the increase in the entropy. Meaning when there is a increase of this gas molecules, when there is an increase of concentration of this gas molecule in this region where originally it was comprised of just C alone, then correspondingly there is an increase in the entropy. So let me repeat, initially here the concentration of D was 0, but as the concentration increased, we saw that the entropy also correspondingly increases. So let us adapt the same understanding to this case. So what we essentially have is, we have a change, we are considering the change in the entropy with respect to the concentration of B. So here we saw that the entropy increases when the concentration of D in this region, which was originally occupied by C, increases, the correspondingly the entropy increases. Meaning the more you allow the system to mix, the more random the system becomes, and correspondingly the entropy increases. So one way of identifying the mixture is, one way of realizing that system has mixed or it has mingled is considering the amount of D in a region where originally only C was present. So let us adapt the same understanding to this to our description of the solid solution. So we are considering a solid solution wherein there is a change in the concentration of B. So here at this extreme we have A alone, and here at this extreme we have B alone. Now when you add B to this extreme, what you are creating is a solution of A and B, wherein A is the solvent. When you add B, or when you add A here, what you are creating is, you are creating a solution of A and B, wherein A is the solute. So here at this extreme you are creating a solution, and you need to add B here. So when you add B, the B acts as the solute and A acts as the solvent, because here the amount of A is higher. In the same way, in this extreme, when you want to have a solution, you will include A, where so A acts as, so in this region A will act as the solute. So from this extreme A will act as the solute and B will act as the solvent. In this extreme, the A will act as the solvent and B will act as the solute. Again, B is the alloying element, here A is the alloying element. We are starting from pure A, so when you add B, B will act as the alloying element. Here we are starting from pure B, and when you add A will act as the alloying element. So depending on the amount of alloying element you add, the entropy correspondingly increases. So there will be an increase in the entropy. In the same way, depending on the amount of alloying element you add to B, the entropy correspondingly increases. And at the point, that is 0.5, you will not be able to make any distinction between solute and solvent, and that is what will represent the peak. So this is how, rather schematically, how the entropy changes when you keep on adding the alloying element. So in case of A, you start with A, if you start with A and if you keep on adding the alloying element till this point here, the A will be solute, or rather A will be the solvent and B will be the alloying element, because till this point here A has the maximum concentration, and beyond this point B will have the maximum concentration. So therefore B will become the solvent and A will become the alloying element. So when you start from here and here simultaneously, the increase will rather be symmetric and it will terminate at this point. So you will get a trend like this. So when you start from here, A is the solvent and you keep on adding the alloying element and the entropy keeps on increasing. At the same time, you consider this end, this extreme, wherein B is the solvent. You keep on adding the alloying element, the entropy correspondingly keeps on increasing. You reach this point here. Now, what we have, the way we change in the entropy relates to the Gibbs free energy is not in this manner, but in the negative manner. So we need to include a minus sign here. So therefore, the change in the entropy with the inclusion of negative sign will be of this form. The trend remains the same, but the direction will be completely reversed. So you will have minus delta S, which is represented by the red line here. So therefore, ultimately, what governs the change in the Gibbs free energy when the mechanical mixture changes to the solution is the red line here. So this delta S here graphically is illustrated by this red line here. So now let us expand this delta G, that is the change in the Gibbs free energy when the mechanical mixture changes to solution. Again, the difference is, so this is something that we have written in the previous slide as well. So this delta G is nothing but the difference in the Gibbs free energy between the solution and the mechanical mixture. So when you consider these two, so what we end up having is the Gibbs free energy of the solution is nothing but the sum of the change in the Gibbs free energy plus the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture. So we have already represented how the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture looks like. So we have the Gibbs free energy and we have how it varies with the concentration XB, and we have shown that the Gibbs free energy of a mechanical mixture, it varies in a linear manner starting from these 2 points here that indicates the Gibbs free energy in the pure state. So starting and ending at these 2 points here, this is how in a linear fashion the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture varies. This we have already shown. Now when you combine this to this trend here, so we need to take the product, and since the product is a constant, the trend is not going to change. So we need to augment this red section of this curve, which is represented or which represents the change in the Gibbs free energy. So this change in the Gibbs free energy is indicated by this expression here. This expression is illustrated in the red line here. So therefore, to arrive at the Gibbs free energy of the solution, we have to combine the straight line that is representing the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture, the linear relation that is representing the Gibbs free energy of the mechanical mixture, to the red curved line that represents the change in the Gibbs free energy. So this term here is represented by the red curved line. This term here is represented by the linear red curve here, and this term here is represented by the linear line here. So combination of these two, combination of this linear and the red curve here gives you the Gibbs free energy of the solution. And when we do that, we end up schematically having a curve like this, which is the curve for the solution. So this is or the curve for the Gibbs free energy of an alloy. So whenever you see or whenever you plot the Gibbs free energy of an alloy, whenever you plot a Gibbs free energy of a solid solution, the trend usually is of this form, and the nature is primarily because when it is a mechanical mixture, it is a linear. The reason why we arrive at this trend is primarily because we have a linear relation for the mechanical mixture, and to that we are augmenting how the corresponding free energy changes when the mechanical mixture transforms to a solution. So this here this linear line represents the Gibbs free energy for the mechanical mixture, whereas the curved line or the curve here represents the Gibbs free energy of the solution. So this trend is often observed for the alloy or the solid solution, and this indicates that this curved line indicates that more than being a just mechanical mixture, the combination of the two elements that you have considered is favors to become a solid solution or an alloy. So instead of just being a mechanical mixture, these two solutions or these two elements that you have considered, in this case A and B, they favor to form a solid solution. And when they favor to form a solid solution, this is how the curve looks like. This is how their Gibbs free energy looks like. So whenever you see a Gibbs free energy of this form here, you can claim that to certain degree of certainty that this indicates a curve of a solid solution, which is more preferred than just a mechanical mixture. This curve indicates the trend or the Gibbs free energy of an alloy, not just a mechanical mixture. So if you see change in the Gibbs free energy curve for an alloy that is represented in this way, now you know the reason why people or why it is generally represented, why the change in the Gibbs free energy curve for an alloy or a solid solution is represented using this curve, why a downward curve is often employed to represent the change in the Gibbs free energy or the Gibbs free energy of the solution with respect to the concentration. Now, having arrived at this particular curve here, we need to relax the assumption that we have made. So earlier we have made this assumption that the change in the enthalpy when the mechanical mixture transforms to solution is close to zero. So this is an ideal case, and therefore such a solution that is arrived when the mechanical mixture transforms and there is no change in the enthalpy, such a solution is referred to as the ideal solution. So only in the ideal case, when there is a mixture or transforming to a solution, when there is a solution that is forming, you will have negligible change in the enthalpy. In most cases, there is a discernible change in the enthalpy. Now, the only difference is like when you include a non-zero change in the enthalpy, when there is a change in the enthalpy. Now, we have in our previous discussion, we need to consider when you have a non-zero change in the enthalpy, we need to include its influence on the change in the Gibbs free energy that translates the mechanical mixtures to the solution. This is the expression that governs the change in the mechanical mixture to solution, or at least the formation of the solution. Now initially we assume this term, the influence of this term, to be negligible. Now by relaxing that condition, we now have a certain degree of influence that is imposed by the change in the enthalpy. Now while considering or while introducing enthalpy in a generalized framework, we were able to relate the enthalpy to a material property. So this enthalpy can be related to a material property, or it can be associated with a material property, particularly when in the cases we are considering, in the conditions that we are considering, that is temperature and pressure is constant. So when you have such a condition where one of the variables, so we have two variables, one is the entropy, the other is the enthalpy, when one of the variable is rather locked in with the material constant or the material property, a significant change cannot be expected of this variable. Let me repeat, what we are now considering is a solution where there is an enthalpy change occurring when the solution changes from, or rather when the combination of A and B changes from a mechanical mixture to a solution. Now in this case, we have seen that the change in the enthalpy can be related to a material property. Now when you have a variable that is related to a material property, even though there is a change in the concentration, even though the alloy composition changes. So when we say there is a change in the concentration, what we are essentially talking about is we are talking about a different alloys, different alloy composition. Even though there might be a different alloy composition, there we cannot expect a significant change as significant as that of the entropy, because entropy, it describes the degree of randomness. However, this is locked in with the property of the material. So therefore, despite the non-zero, despite the influence of the enthalpy, what we end up having is the entropy ultimately governing the resultant change in the Gibbs free energy. So this can be graphically represented in this manner. So let us consider a similar case where we have the change in the concentration. So this separates this plot into positive and the negative quadrant. So this separates the plot into positive and the negative quadrant. So the concentration along the x-axis changes from 0 to 1 of the component B. Now this enthalpy is locked in with the material property, and each of these points indicate different alloys. So therefore there will be a change in the enthalpy. So there will be a change in the material property, and correspondingly there will be a change in the enthalpy, and it can be represented in this manner schematically again. However, even though this is a material property, or this is locked in with the material property, this is purely dependent on concentration, and it is dependent on the degree of randomness. So therefore the way it varies will be significant. Therefore the way the entropy varies will be highly significant. So the combination of these two curves, the black that represents the change in the enthalpy and the red that represents the change in the entropy. So the combination of these two curves is what gives you the overall change in the Gibbs free energy when the mechanical mixture changes to solution. So when you combine these two, what we end up having is a curve of this form here, which is still downward pointed and highly influenced by the change in the entropy, relatively when compared to the enthalpy change, it is still influenced by the entropy, and therefore the curve adopts this form like this. And when you combine this curve again to the linear curve, the linear relation between, or the linear relation that is established by the mechanical mixture, you still end up having a curve like this that dictates the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to concentration. So irrespective of the influence of, or irrespective of the role of the enthalpy change, be it 0 or be it non-zero, when you have a transformation of the mechanical mixture to a solution, the nature of the curve remains the same. So even when you have an ideal solution wherein the change in the enthalpy is 0, or a regular solution wherein there is a change in the enthalpy when there is a dissolution, when there is a complete mixing, irrespective of it, when you end up having a solution, when the end product is a solution, when the mechanical mixture changes to a solution, when just a mechanical mixture, just adding a block, a solid block to a molten iron gives you an alloy of iron and chromium, when that occurs, the trend that you observe will be of this form here. So this is how the Gibbs free energy of a solution, a solid solution, would look like when it forms an alloy. Now, having gained this understanding, having understood why a curve is often employed to represent the change in the Gibbs free energy of the solution, let us look closely into our expression for the Gibbs free energies itself. So we have, in order to arrive at this, the starting point for both these is that we were able to relate the Gibbs free energy to the chemical potential. To arrive at this understanding, we were able to relate the Gibbs free energy to the chemical potential, which is expressed in this way. Now let us consider two phases, say phase alpha and phase beta. So we are now considering two phases that comprises of the components A and B. So we have phase alpha and phase beta. Now the generalized way of representing it would be something like this: mu I xi alpha, mu I beta xi beta, or rather alpha. So this is the generalized way of representing it. We are differentiating both the phases and the components using this beta here. We are qualifying both the chemical potential and the concentration for alpha and beta. Now, when we say that beta is more stable at a given combination of temperature and pressure, for a given combination of temperature and pressure, beta is more stable than alpha. Beta is stable than alpha, then it means delta G, that is G beta minus G alpha, is less than 0. Only when this condition is satisfied, you have the beta being more stable than alpha. So only when G of beta, G beta less than G alpha, you would end up having the beta being more stable than alpha. So if we start a system with alpha, this transformation is possible, this alpha to beta transformation is possible when G beta is less than G alpha. Now we saw that the variable that governs the G beta is the combination of the summation of mu I, that is the chemical potential in beta, and the corresponding concentration in beta. Here is the same. The factor that governs the Gibbs free energy of alpha is the combination of the chemical potential of its component in alpha and its concentration in alpha. So this condition can be related to the chemical potential of the individual components that is present in the system. So beta comprises of k components, alpha comprises of k components, and each component they have their own chemical potential, and this relation that we have arrived from the second law of thermodynamics can be related to the chemical potential of the individual components. Now, the summation of all the concentration, since we have employed the mole fraction, is equal to 1. So we are considering a closed system, and in that system we have different components that are present, and this system is changing its phase. Since it is a closed system, it is changing its place, and since it is a closed system, there is no external change in the concentration. So the sum of the concentration, the sum of xi alpha, because it's a closed system, is equal to the sum of xi beta. So the concentration remains the same even though the state changes. So therefore, this relation here ultimately depends on the chemical potential of the individual components. This relation here can be satisfied only when the chemical potential of the individual component in B is less than the chemical potential of the same component in alpha. So we are considering two states, alpha and beta. We are considering a change from alpha to beta of a closed system. This is only possible when the Gibbs free energy of beta is less than Gibbs free energy of alpha. However, we have related the Gibbs free energy to chemical potential. Now when you consider this relation, this difference in the Gibbs free energies that allows for the change from alpha to beta is only possible when the chemical potential of the component in beta is less than the chemical potential of the same component in alpha. I hope you are able to understand that. You begin with the second law of thermodynamics, and based on the relation which rather expresses or which rather describes the Gibbs free energy as combinations of chemical potential and the concentration, we were able to arrive at this expression here. Now what this means is that we have components in alpha and beta, and so let us assume such a case. You have beta here, you have alpha here, you have I in beta, you have also I in alpha. However, there is a change because of the difference in free energy. The beta is growing, the alpha is converting to beta, so therefore the beta is growing. For the beta to grow, this alpha should decrease, and this means the component that is here should move to beta, only then the beta will grow. So what drives the movement of components to alpha, from alpha to beta, is that there is a difference in the chemical potential of the component. So in beta, the chemical potential of the component I is less here when compared to alpha, and therefore the component moves from alpha to beta. So we are considering a system that comprises of alpha and beta. The Gibbs free energy of beta is less than the Gibbs free energy of alpha. So therefore the beta is growing. For the beta to grow in a closed system, the component from alpha should move into the beta. And now we have seen that the chemical potential of the component in beta is less than the chemical potential of component in alpha. So therefore, what dictates the movement of the component from alpha to beta is this difference in the chemical potential. So what this means is that the particles or the components, they move from the region of high potential to the region of low potential. And this movement from the region of high potential to the region of low potential is what establishes the phase change. So what we have so far seen is, we are considering a closed system. In that closed system, one phase is growing at the expense of other, because the Gibbs free energy of the one phase beta is less than the Gibbs free energy of the alpha. Now we were able to relate the Gibbs free energy to the chemical potential, and we have seen that since the summation of all the concentration is equal to 1, then the difference in the Gibbs free energy is governed by the difference in the chemical potential. So when you say the Gibbs free energy of beta is less than the Gibbs free energy of alpha, what ultimately you are saying is the chemical potential of the components in beta is less than the chemical potential of components in alpha. So therefore, the beta grows at the expense of alpha because the system, the components that constitute alpha is moving into beta driven by this difference in the chemical potential. The components in alpha, they are in the high potential region and they are moving towards a low potential region. You can imagine this gradient something like this, even a steeper gradient something like this. The I component is, or the component I is in the higher potential region and it is moving towards a lower potential region, which is the beta. And as the components keep on moving, the transition is established. So ultimately, when you see a phase change, it is established by this component here, by the chemical potential of the component. It is driven by the difference in the chemical potential of the component. When we say B as a lower Gibbs free energy, what we essentially mean by that is the chemical potential of the components that constitute B is lower in the B, whereas in all the other phases it is higher. So therefore, the components move from alpha to beta. Now, when an equilibrium is established, when the Gibbs free energy is equivalent to, or for the beta is equivalent to the Gibbs free energy of alpha, then this is established when the chemical potential are equal. So that means there is no longer transition that is required because both the components have achieved a stable state. Both the components are in its low energy state. They are experiencing. There is no high potential region, there is no low potential region. Both these components stay, or they have the same potential. So therefore, they are in the stable state. So this understanding is important for us to say which phase is rather stable at a given state. So meaning, now we have seen that the Gibbs free energy of a solution. So the Gibbs free energy, when you consider a solution, the Gibbs free energy of a solution is represented in this manner. So Gibbs free energy of a solution, which generally adopts a form something like this. This is how the Gibbs free energy of the solution adopts a form, and that is what we have seen in this lecture. Now, by adapting or by considering this understanding that we have gained, we will be able to predict which phase will be stable for a given condition. So we have create a new page. So what we have is, let us consider a case wherein we have two possible solutions, that is solution A and a solution B. So for a given temperature and a pressure, we have an alloy A and an alloy B, and this is the Gibbs free energy of the corresponding alloys as the concentration varies. From this and our understanding of the second law of thermodynamics, we can state that beta is more stable than alpha, because beta has a lower Gibbs free energy when compared to alpha. So even though when you start a system with alpha, it will automatically transform to beta. So for this combination of temperature and pressure from the Gibbs free energy, it is possible for us to state which phase is rather more stable than the other. Now let us consider another example, reversed example of this. If we have a plot something like this which represent beta and another curve that is like this which represent alpha, in this case the alpha will be more stable than beta because it has a lower Gibbs free energy than that of beta. So even though you start or you initiate a system, even though you have a system that is of beta, it will ultimately transform to alpha for the given combination of temperature and pressure. Now for a stable case, for a stable condition, when alpha and beta are in equilibrium, when both these phases are stable with one another. So when we have a condition that indicates that both alpha and beta are stable for a given combination of temperature and pressure, it means that the chemical potential of the component, that is B in this case, should be equal. That is, the chemical potential of B in alpha should be equivalent to the chemical potential of B in beta. So only when this is satisfied, you would be able to establish a stability between alpha and beta. Now how can we establish or how can we represent a stable condition wherein the chemical potential of the component B is same in both alpha and beta? So how can we? So these two cases wherein when beta is stable, we were able to represent it graphically. When alpha is stable, we were able to represent it graphically. When both these are stable, how can we do that? Now in order to understand that, we need to consider what is the meaning of the chemical potential. It is nothing but the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to the concentration. So we are considering the chemical potential of the component B. So the chemical potential of the component B is nothing but the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to the corresponding change in the component. Now in this plot here, when we have a plot that represents the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to the concentration of beta, this derivative here, it represents the slope. So when you have two curves such as this, one representing alpha and the other representing beta, and it is possible for us to draw a line in such a way that it acts as a tangent for both these curves, then what we have done is we have created a slope for a specific points which are equal. So when we are able to draw a tangent that touches both these curves, then what we have essentially established is that at these 2 points, say point A and B, so you have created a tangent, you have plotted a tangent that touches these curves at point A and B, and at this point A and B, the slope of this tangent is the same. So this tangent is a straight line, it has a constant slope, and it touches the point, or it touches the curves alpha and beta at A and B. So at these 2 points, what we essentially have is the slope is, or the derivative at these 2 points A and B, so G alpha by at A is equivalent to the Gibbs free energy or change in the Gibbs free energy of beta with respect to the concentration B at B. So what we have is we have two different curves representing the Gibbs free energy of alpha and beta, and it is possible for us to drop a tangent that touches both these curves. So what essentially it means is that we have identified 2 points A and B, and at these 2 points A and B, the first derivative or the slope is equal. So meaning the chemical potential at these 2 points for A alpha and beta phases are equal. So that means what we end up, what we have ultimately established, or what we have ultimately identified is we have identified 2 spots or 2 concentrations wherein these 2 phases will be stable. So X alpha B and X alpha beta B. So these are 2 concentrations wherein the phases will be stable. So we have now arrived at 3 different conditions. We have seen when alpha will be stable and when beta will be stable and when both these will be stable. So 2 phases will be stable only when we are able to plot a common tangent that connects, or common tangents that touches both these curves. If we are not able to arrive at such a, if we are not able to plot such a common tangent, what we ultimately end up having is we will end up having a system wherein one of these two phases is only stable. When we want to have both these phases, when we have a condition wherein both these phases are stable, then it will be possible for us to drop a common tangent. When it is possible for us to drop a common tangent, then it becomes, we can say that these two phases are in equilibrium. So these two phases are stable. So what we have essentially arrived at is, we have seen what would be the generalized nature of the Gibbs free energy curve for an alloy, and how, depending on these curves and the position of these curves, when we are considering two or more phases, we will be able to identify which phase is more stable. This, we have restricted ourselves to two phases. It is also possible for us to consider even more phases. Now, identifying which phase is stable, if only one phase is stable, is straightforward, because that phase will have lowest Gibbs free energy. On the other hand, if we have more than two or more phases coexisting at a given temperature and pressure, then in those cases what we essentially have is, we would have, or we will be able to plot a common tangent that touches the different Gibbs free energy curves that corresponds to the different phases. You have different Gibbs free energy curves for alpha and beta, and we have a common tangent touching this, and this is only possible when you have a condition wherein both alpha and beta are stable. So, based on, just by looking into the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to concentration, we will be able to say which phase or phases are stable. When it is not possible for us to plot a common tangent between the two curves, then only one of the phases with the lowest Gibbs free energy is stable. On the other hand, if we are able to plot a common tangent, then depending on how many points or how many curves this common tangent touches, so many number of phases are stable in that conditions. The reason we have this common tangent is because when a common tangent with a constant slope, so common tangent is a straight line, it has a constant slope, it touches the specific points of this curve. These points indicate these slopes at these points are constant. So when the slopes at these points are constant, what we have is the chemical potential at these points are constant. So therefore, the phases are in equilibrium or in stability with each other. Now, I understand that I have taken, or I have gone beyond the stipulated time, but in order to wind up, let me just relate this to the phase diagram that we usually observe. So we often observe, or it is possible for us to relate this understanding to the phase diagram. So we were able to do that earlier, in the sense we were able to relate the phase diagram, we were able to extract the phase diagram for the unary system from the Gibbs free energy curve. From the Gibbs free energy curve, we were able to extract the phase diagram. Now in this case, what we have is a Gibbs free energy curve that is dependent on the concentration. Now even from this, it is possible for us to extract a phase diagram. So far what we have considered is how the Gibbs free energy changes with the concentration. So we were able to quantify how the Gibbs free energy changes with concentration. Now this assumes the temperature and pressure are constant, or at least let us for our sake assume that the temperature is constant. So pressure is always constant. For this case, we have assumed the temperature is constant. Now it is also possible for us to have another illustration wherein the Gibbs free energy varies with the temperature, holding the composition to be constant, and we will be able to arrive at the several different depictions of, or observe the trend in how the Gibbs free energy changes with respect to temperature. Now we will be able to get rid of this here, that is the change in the Gibbs free energy, by introducing the second law of thermodynamics. Our goal is not to quantify how much the Gibbs free energy is, but our goal is rather to say what would be the stable phase. So therefore, instead of, so like we considered for the unary system, whenever we introduce, or when we introduce that condition, stating that our goal is not to quantify the amount of Gibbs free energy, but just to quantify the lowest one, or just to identify the phase with the lowest Gibbs free energy, then it is possible for us to have a phase diagram which in this case would be dependent on the concentration and temperature. So what we have now established is a binary phase diagram, that is dependent on the concentration and the temperature. Now when you have, say, components A and B that are completely soluble with one another, you will end up having a phase diagram something such as this, wherein this region indicates the liquid phase, this region indicates the solid phase, and this region indicates the combination of liquid and solid phase. And now when you consider the nature of the Gibbs free energy versus composition curve for a constant temperature. So let us consider a temperature wherein the liquid state is stable, or rather liquid state is stable, so temperature in this region. And when we are considering the change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to concentration, it will look something like this. So black indicates the Gibbs free energy of the liquid, and the red indicates the Gibbs free energy of the solid. So this is the Gibbs free energy of the liquid, and the red indicates the Gibbs free energy of the solid. So this is what this section of the phase diagram, the liquid section of the phase diagram, and the Gibbs free energy curve for the liquid section of the phase diagram would look like. Now on the other hand, when you consider the section of the phase diagram which completely comprises of solid, it would look something like this. Let me draw it more legibly. So what we now have is, we are considering a temperature wherein only the solid is constant. So its corresponding change in the Gibbs free energy with respect to the composition would look something like this. Here, since the solid is constant, the Gibbs free energy of the solid will be much less than the Gibbs free energy of the liquid. Now let us consider a temperature wherein both liquid and solid are stable with one another. So let us consider a Gibbs free energy curve wherein liquid and solid are stable with one another. So what you would end up having is, you would end up having a combination of curves such as these, wherein it is possible for us to drop a common tangent. So when it is possible for us to drop a common tangent, then it means that a common tangent, something like this, then it means that both the phases, that is the liquid and the solid phase, are in equilibrium with each other. So whenever you see a phase diagram with a section wherein there is only one phase stable, a section wherein there is two phase stable, a section wherein there is another three phase stable, so you will be able to at least schematically understand how the Gibbs free energy of the different phases in these different sections would vary. So whenever you identify a phase diagram with only one, or a region in the phase diagram where only one phase is stable, it means the Gibbs free energy of that phase is completely less than the other phase irrespective of the concentration. And on the other hand, if you see a section wherein the combination of the phases are stable, so you have two phases or more phases exhibiting a similarity or coexisting in a stable state, then it means that it is possible for us to drop a common tangent across each of these curves that indicate the Gibbs free energy change of that particular phase with respect to concentration. So when it is possible for us to drop a common tangent, it means that there is a possibility of these different phases coexisting with each other. So here we have considered two phases. If we consider three, then there will be three curves and we will be dropping a common tangent. Four phases, four curves connected through a common tangent. When it is possible for us to connect the different phases, the curves of the different phases to common tangent, it means there is a possibility for all these phases to coexist. If not, the lowest one will exist at the expense of the other. So essentially, we were now able to relate the thermodynamics of solutions to the thermodynamics of alloys, and now we were able to understand how, when we consider the phase diagram, maybe in physical metallurgy, when you consider the phase diagram, what thermodynamically it means. When you consider a phase diagram where only a section of the phase diagram only one phase is present, it means the Gibbs free energy of the phases rather the minimal most. So that is straightforward for us to understand. It is the second law of thermodynamics. On the other hand, when we observe that there are more phases that are coexisting for a given combination of temperature and concentration, it means that we will be able to drop a common tangent touching each of these curves that indicates different faces. And this common, the point where this tangent touches each of these curves, is the point where the concentration or the potential of these individual components are equal with one another. So therefore, there is no significant difference. There is no driving force for the components to move from one phase to another, thereby establishing a phase change. So with this, we are winding up this course. So I hope you are able to understand or able to relate or found a way to relate. So generalized understanding to relate on how the concepts of thermodynamics can be adopted to understand the behavior of materials, particularly to describe their phases, their given phase and their change in phase. Goodbye.